Cloud adoption is ramping up, but prevention-based security isn't enough for the hybrid attack surface. That's why Gartner predicts that 60% of enterprise security budgets will go towards detection and response in 2020. ExtraHop Reveal X Cloud delivers cloud-native network detection and response for the hybrid enterprise, the only SaaS-based NDR solution for AWS. Request a 30-day free trial of Reveal X Cloud at extrahop.com/trial. That's extrahop.com/trial. Keep your company and products relevant, competitive, and reliable by standardizing your security framework to protect intellectual property, become a reliable business partner, and guard financial and customer information. Standards Connect is an online standards management solution from ANSI. It's standards access simplified. Standards Connect is a cost-saving, fully customizable solution for entrepreneurs and companies that spend $2,000 or more per year on standards and want to translate spend into a subscription model, want to simplify access, search, monitoring, and collaboration, or need a centralized hub of standards for multiple users at one or more locations. Get a free trial at securityweekly.com/ANSI. That's /ANSI.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. Register for one of our upcoming webcasts. It's the last two. You can join us for Great Horn or Core Security, or both of them, by going to securityweekly.com, click the webcast drop-down and select registration. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them in our on-demand library by selecting on-demand from the webcast drop-down. If you attend...
Oh, sorry, Matt. I thought you were done with that announcement.
Almost.
If you attend any of our webcasts, sorry, continue.
You'll receive 1 CPE credit per webcast.
So I don't know if you looked at the slides for the Great Horn one that's coming up this Thursday.
I have not yet. I will.
I shared those with you this morning, and of course, Google Drive is awesome at telling you that you shared stuff with other people. I don't know if anyone that uses Google Drive has that frustration. It's awful. In any case, I did a lot of research into like what the latest phishing techniques are from the red team side. So folks are definitely going to want to check that out. It's one of those webcasts where I had the luxury of doing some research into the topic and chatting with a couple of people like John Strand and being like, so what's the scoop with email phishing? Not a lot has changed, but there's some really cool research, and I've got presentations I linked to from some recent conferences that are like the latest and greatest bleeding edge phishing research. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's great. Yeah, and Great Horn's got a great solution. We had Kevin O'Brien on here a few weeks ago, so it'll be a good session.
You got all these advanced techniques when you need something equally as advanced to combat them, and from just speaking with Kevin, like basically what they've created. So
exactly. All right, this segment is leadership and communication, so let's dig into a couple of those. This first article, Jason, I want your opinion on this one because this is an interesting one. CISOs left in a compromising position as organizations tout cyber robustness. Now, I know that you at Carousel have been instrumental in really working closely with the business and using security as a sales tool. So I assume the 71% you don't fit into that said their organization uses their security posture as a selling point despite their lack of confidence in the security stack. I assume you're not in that bucket.
Well, I mean, you sit back and you say to yourself, I mean, number one, we're having conversations saying, listen, we're putting our organization's best foot forward. We focus on it. But there's no silver bullet. I mean, I wouldn't be out there touting it, right, and being like, we're the most secure MSP on the face of the earth. No.
All that does is get you hacked.
That's all that does is put a bullseye on you, right? But, you know, our conversations are more along the lines of, here's how we've architected our managed service to put security first for you, to put compliance first for you. And here's what we've done. Vet it, beat it up, talk to us about it.
It's more about the process than
it really is, right? I mean, for us, it's about the process. It's about the continuous improvement. It's about the continuous focus and the continuous conversations, right? Because, you know, we have 6,000 customers. There's a lot of compliance and regulatory and security needs that they have. And it's having these proactive conversations with them, you know, CISO to CISO, executive to executive, and saying, all right, what's going on in your industry, your vertical coming up in 2020? And then we start thinking together, having that relationship and that collaboration on how we can continuously improve our services. That's what it's more about, right? We're not going out there saying, you know, we're the best, we're the most secure, because, you know, that's who has that conversation, right?
Oracle Didn't end that well for them.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about it. I mean, we want to be responsible in these conversations, and it's more along the lines of we want to do what's best for you, our customer. Let's work together on a good solution.
But responsibility is a good aspect, right? Because I think it's far easier to add technology and services without considering or implementing security at all, right?
Sure.
In its infancy, some of these projects, proof of concepts, hopefully, my optimism, right, are done just that way. But being responsible and knowing that you have to apply security and controls to that process, and that it is an iterative process, that you're not done. You're just always protecting and being more resilient with what you offer. That's what you look for in a partner or a security vendor, right? Not someone like Jason says that says everything's secure, and not the other end of the spectrum.
Don't worry about a thing.
What's security? Like, we use SSL and we're PCI compliant, so we're secure, right?
Right.
We're good. Yeah, and I think what I was really getting to in this article is, Jason, you work very closely with your executive team, and you're making decisions as a business, where what I think is in a lot of these results is they don't have that same level of coordination with their executive team, and therefore they feel that they're not doing the right things, even though the business is out promoting that they are doing the right things. And again, they're probably a little fearful that because they don't have some of the buy-in, some of the other controls in place, they might be, they might have a target on their back.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, for us, it's more about having that collaboration across all of our business units, right? So when we're having conversations around security, we're all in the room together with the same message because we're building the message together. So my senior vice president or executive vice president of services, we're having those discussions around the security and the processes around our services. He's on those phone calls with me when we're speaking to CIOs and CISOs, right? So we're building the architecture together. They're a key stakeholder in the architecture build, so they're familiar with it. The engineering teams are vetting it, right? So we do this together. Same with the CFO. I mean, I have conversations with our CFO all the time about our security posture, how we manage data, how we're managing our data integrity, right? So we're all on the same page. I guess that's the benefit of the collaboration environment, that ecosystem that I'm lucky enough to be part of, is that we're having these conversations weekly. Right, we're having these type of conversations where we can say, all right, I have this customer. Here's the fear that's on the table today. They're evaluating us as a third-party vendor. Jason, can you get on the phone with me and the customer stakeholder and let's talk through this, right? And it's not always that we have the answer. In instances, we will build the answer to that problem, right? Because we're a partner. Compliance changes, regulatory requirements change, security needs within their organization changes. I can't say to myself, I'm always going to be on top of that. There's no way. It's impossible for me to always be on top of that. But if I'm having the right conversations with the right customers at the right time, we can get ahead of that.
Yeah.
So it's minimizing the risk, right? We want to be that vendor you can go to and say, listen, we're going to do our best to minimize the risk to your organization as your third-party vendor.
Yeah, and a big key part of that is communication. There's a couple podcasts in here in this week's that are around team building and motivating employees, et cetera. And one of the common themes through both of those podcasts, if you listen to them, is communication.
100%.
Purpose, right? Laying out the vision, kind of what the purpose of the organization, why, right? And back to your conversation we were just having on this front, right? That is something that the organization has to embrace across the board, whether it is security or how to educate, update their teams on the vision of the company, their purpose, how to motivate them, how to move forward. Lots of communication required across this process. And I thought these two podcasts were really good at kind of reinforcing why communication is so important internally to an organization.
I will say the one thing that surprised me about this article, because they did a lot of analysis, right? They had areas ranked for top investment over the next 3 years. And I was very surprised that third-party supply chain fell at the bottom. It was 6%.
You'd think that would be higher.
I know.
Given breaches that have happened,
right? That are happening through these third parties, right? I mean, you looked at cyber monitoring was the highest. Talking about cyber resilience, whatever the context of that may be, and then cyber governance and those type of things, and then stakeholder awareness kind of fell down there. But the last one was third party and supply chain management. That surprised me a lot. That's something that I uber focus on, right? Because I mean, you have a certain level of control of what happens within your organization, certain level, but you have less and less control over your third parties unless you're doing a decent job monitoring them and assessing them.
And maybe that's an indicator of how not mature the internal stuff is and why that's so much lower on the list. Because to your point, if you were controlling the internal stuff, that would be the next major place you'd have to go focus. So it may be a lack of maturity in that respect.
Could be,
There was a really interesting example for innovation, right? We always talk about innovation, and everybody's wants to build this innovation ecosystem. And there was a research study done on the Bosch Accelerator program, and it provided kind of a structured way to do innovation. The results were interesting.
Yeah.
Not
They were.
They were not on the positive side, folks. By the way,
right.
But I thought their approach to how they structured innovation programs was interesting. They leaders identified teams of 25 to 30 members, gave them the ability to work on an innovation project for 6 to 12 months. They gave them a certain amount of funding and forced them to give them results at the end of that first period before they would decide to give them more of an investment or not, right? Yeah. So they wanted to innovate. They identified high performance teams, gave them some investment, and then said, if you want more investment to continue this, we'll give you some more investment. Right? Very structured way to do it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, like you had mentioned, the results are kind of iffy, but I think coming out of this, the one thing that I grabbed a hold of is the foundation that you need to achieve this, right? And it's, number one, as an organization or as a leader, realize that decision-making needs to be collaborative. We talked about this before, right? This is how, our business leaders within our organization, this is how we roll, right? We're collaborative. We talk to each other. We communicate with each other. We realize that we're smarter as a team than we are as an individual. So let's share the wealth. Let's share the knowledge, right? So realize that it can't be centralized. It can't just be you. Except that you don't always have the winning ideas. You're not always going to be that person who has that epiphany and comes up with the best idea in the room. So take that as well. But then know it's okay to fail, right? As long as you're doing it in a structured fashion, failure is part of innovation. I mean, you have to be able to have that mindset to say, you're going to be putting people on these new projects, these new ideas, really vetting out if it's something viable for the organization. Failure is an option because you have to experiment, right? And you have to be working collaboratively across the organization, and not everything's going to be a success. And the last piece was, don't be afraid to bring in external partners or external stakeholders, right? Pull ideas from the many, right? That's one of the other things I pulled out of this.
Well, I think there's something to be said for innovation and prototyping that we can do at a much faster rate today with the technology that allows you to fail faster, to Jason's point.
Yeah.
You don't, every idea is not a good one, right? But
That's
until you prototype it and get it out there, you don't know if it's going to have legs or not. So I think this is an important exercise for companies.
Yeah, the result was interesting, right? Yeah. 70% of the projects failed after the first investment.
Right. Which is about 120,000 euros, I think is what it was.
Yeah. 70% of 109 teams, right? So start doing the math.
Exactly.
This was an expensive experiment, by the way.
Yeah.
So 70% failed after the first. So that's 70 some companies at 120,000 euros. Okay, so that almost $1 billion euros. Okay, in the first round. Another 72% failed after the second round. Only 14 teams of the original 109 actually moved forward. And so what I think is important here is they made the investment, but the return on investment was roughly about 12, 13%, something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe that was success for them. There's not a lot of organizations that are going to kind of invest that kind of money. I mean, $1 billion in round one.
The devil's in the details. Like, how much revenue came out of those 14 teams at the end of the day, right? Like, were there innovations, these major company-changing or innovative things that they rolled out that were multi-billion-dollar business units?
They found out earlier in the process if it was going to fail.
Yeah.
Which could potentially have saved them money, as if they found out way later in the process that, oh my God, that was a complete flop.
Yeah, because their limits
we talked about Newton. That was a pretty good example of that.
Yeah.
Coming to market with had they maybe done this process and prototyped it, right?
They had
it was just too early. That's not to say these things with Newton as an example, right? It was really just too early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about this, guys, these could have been multi-year initiatives, right? And what they said was, round one, you got 6 to 12 months to prove yourself. So, I mean, they may have been, this organization, Bosch may have been having programs that lasted years. And maybe now they're saying, all right, this is our way to kind of wean it down and say, you got 6 to 12 months to prove yourself. And if you can't do it, you're not going to round 2.
Right.
Yep. And that leads into the second article where it talks about digital transformation, innovation.
Yeah.
Teams have to work quicker. They have to determine when to partner and when not to partner, and they have to upskill, right? And so in a shorter duration, you fail fast, to Paul's point. You learn from those mistakes. You decide where you partner and where you do some things yourself internally. And it's this iterative process, and that's how you're going to create some of these innovative products.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a blessing and a curse to that, right? I mean, one of the things in the article was, listen, we realized we had to go to market quickly, so that meant the company made mistakes when they rolled stuff out, right? So, I mean, that's going to happen as well. So there's the pros and the cons, there's the risks, but, it's one of those scenarios where you have to be measuring that level of risk that you can tolerate as an organization and know that you're going to go out there, and there's going to be certain aspects of this when you go live that are going to fail or that are going to be roadblocks, right? That you're going to need to fix pretty quick. And the other side, too, was the reskilling portion, right? It was, there's so much disruption in the workforce today. We need to do a better job of honing in those skills and reskilling people.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's hard to find that talent, and how do you reskill them quickly so you can stay competitive in this environment.
You have to have the skilled employees at the rate of innovation that you're deploying. So you got to balance those two, because if you don't have the people, you're not going to have the innovation.
Yes. This last article, the highest performing teams have these 4 mindsets. I think this is one of your older articles. I've been waiting for you to come back on the show so we could cover it. High performance teams are defined by 4 key mindsets. You want to walk us through this quickly, Jason?
So hold on. I just want to make sure I'm on the right article here. Is this the Saban article?
It's which one is that one?
Leaderchat.org.
Yeah. It's the Blanchard. Yeah.
Do you want to read them for you?
Yeah. Why don't you bring that one back up for me, because
Teams
I didn't have it on my list.
clarity above all else.
All else.
All right, you're gonna have to cover that one for me, because I didn't have that one on my list.
No worries.
Oh.
I mean, these are all things we've talked about before.
Yeah. I just got to bring the article up.
Yeah, I mean, having goals and direction is certainly, I would put that as number 1, right? You don't know where you're going, you can't build an effective team.
Yeah, I mean the why, right? I mean it's the whole story around the why. If teams don't understand the why and where they're going, you're gonna face motivation issues. You're gonna face issues with productivity.
Great examples of that in extreme ownership too.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, that's probably the best examples I've read in recent times of example. I mean, they give very clear examples in that book. The book is called, for our audience, we've talked about it in the past, Jocko, right?
Yep.
Extreme Ownership. Again, there's a million books by ex-Navy SEALs. If you had to pick one, I mean, not that I've read all of them, right? But it's heralded as one of the best ones by former Navy SEALs, right? He gives examples in that book where they were doing business consulting after they left the SEALs and dealing with exactly that situation where employees just didn't understand why they were doing their job, and it was a huge problem for the organization. They couldn't move forward until they got everyone basically, those cliche things. We're all on the same page, right?
That's the key, right?
That means good communication across the entire organization to provide that level of clarity so everybody knows, oh, I got it. Yeah. Okay, now I know how to move forward.
And the other piece too is as a leader, you need to understand your workforce. Because the way I work with, my teams is that I have to build those individual relationships. I have to be able to speak to people in methods and communicate with them the way they're going to consume it, they're going to understand it, and
that's different across teams.
Yeah, partners, it is, right? My IT operations director, I communicate a lot differently than my director of security. Right. So it's just that communication method. You have to make sure that you know your audience when you're delivering.
And there's definitely
messages.
A splash of empathy in there when you're communicating, and that's different based on the team that you're
on the personality, right?
Yeah,
on the personality that you're working
with.
Yeah, every team member is going to take that communication differently. So to your point, Jason, understanding the type of person that it is changes the way you communicate and work with that person in the organization.
Absolutely. Now, see, number 2 is a lesson from Good to Great that I thought that book, Good to Great, I forget the author of that book. It's called Good to Great. It's a very popular, famous book, right? Collins, yeah. Teams embrace conflict in order to grow. Now, what Good to Great gives fantastic examples of our companies in different verticals, right?
Yep.
Some were just good. Some, the ones that they had chose through their meetings and statistical math, even the process of writing the book underscored point number 2, and that is embracing conflict in order to grow. So the companies that basically went from good to great, one of their characteristics that they shared largely was they could all get in a room, they could all hash it out,
Yep.
they could slam their fist on the table, they could maybe raise their voice, right,
Yep.
and disagree with each other. When they came out of that meeting, everyone, again, was on number 1, clarity of what the mission was.
That's
right.
right.
When they
That's
were
right.
writing the book, there was great debate over which company should be included, what the criteria should be, how you evaluate the criteria. They went through that process internally to write the book, and I think it's the best example of number 2 here.
Right. And some of you may know that I dabbled in politics for a little while. And the one thing that I always used to say to my teams that I learned, I studied great political leaders, right? From the beginning of our nation to today. And one of the best communicators that was out there was Ronald Reagan. He was just a great communicator, right? And he used to have this methodology that he called the 11th commandment. And it was listen, we can get in a room and we can disagree. But we're gonna leave this room and we're still gonna be side by side and be a team. Right? We're going to hash it out in here. We're going to figure out our differences. And by the time we leave, we're all going to be on the same page. So that way we're communicating the same story, the same message, right? And we're the same team. It's a must. You have to. You're never going to agree on 100% of the things. Never.
And I think number 3 instills why that happens, right? Is that there's a level of trust there. There's been trust built between the team members where they can have that conflict. They can have that discussion. They've built trust with across the team. Therefore, when they walk out, they're all on the same page, right? These are so tied together. And why it's so critical for that trust factor, that communication factor, the ability to resolve conflict is why companies and teams succeed.
100%. I mean,
well, and I'm sure I would draw on your experience, Jason, in the military.
And that's the key.
For trust, right? I mean, that's where you see a lot of these references and articles and just speaking with people. And a lot of that trust is built from folks who are in the military, like yourself.
And Simon Sinek, who's a lot of his podcasts, a lot of the things he writes. He actually has a thing out there that's why leaders eat last. Right? And it goes through the whole mentality of military leaders and why when you're in a leadership position, you make sure that all your troops go eat first and you go last, right? Because you want to make sure that they're taken care of. You want to make sure that your teams are taken care of before you take care of yourself. And just the motion of doing that builds a level of trust within your team, right? It's the optics, right? Some of it is the optics around
There's a lot of little things like that.
When you're being selfless, and you're showing that you're being selfless, because if there's no more food left, guess what? I, as a leader, I'm not eating, but my team is taken care of. Well, and that's okay.
And that really ties into number 4 as to how you enable your team to lead themselves.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that becomes a model, right? And they start modeling that way, and then you start seeing all the future leaders really how they're starting to behave, and they behave in the same fashion where they're becoming selfless, right? And they're giving back to the team, and they're putting themselves at potential risk for the team. But it's that trust level that is ingrained when you're in the military that, it is a life or death situation. And when you're elbow to elbow, you know that person's got your back, right? When it is life or death. And it's how do you get that same level of trust in the enterprise, where you know that your leader has your back no matter what. They'll take the fall for you if they have to. Right? Because they love their team and they care so much about their team that they'll take the hits, they'll take the bruises, they'll take the bumps for the team.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I wish we'd see a lot more of that in corporate America.
Right? A lot of it's just the opposite, throwing people under the bus.
And it is, right? And it's unfortunate because if as leaders we realize that if you were a little bit vulnerable and you put yourself out there a little bit, you would get so much more trust and productivity out of your teams because you start building a culture that your team will do anything for you.
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me this week. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.